the deep concern aroused by the enslavement of nature to human designs of shameless exploitation, despite their disastrous consequences on the climate and on the variety of living spaces, leads today many people who intend to defend the ecological cause and the conversion that it calls for in an indispensable and urgent way to seek from what heritage of thought this disaster comes. How can we not be panicked by the terrible harmful effects of the pollution that invades the skies, the seas, and the land? How can we not refuse to let ourselves be dragged towards the worst that will affect the generations that will succeed us? It is because this questioning and many other questions of this kind is so evident that many researchers are questioning the thoughts which, in the spiritual and intellectual heritage of Western countries, bear the responsibility for such a state of affairs. Why do we live in such a dire situation? Why do we enslave nature and mistreat animals? Nowadays, an answer to this question is shared by many people. This is because human beings are thought of themselves as an exception in nature. However, these people insist it's first and foremost the Bible, and in particular the account of creation, that has led us down this pernicious path. A quick reading of the first chapter of Genesis is enough for some defenders of nature to detect in it the primary source of the so formidable and pernicious ecological evils which threaten the land, the seas, and all living species. Elements that go so far as to pollute the air we breathe on a daily basis. It would mean that from the distant past, from which it comes to us, the Bible, by the exceptional status it grants to human beings, had given them license to behave as they pleased in creation, without worrying about what would result for the land, the waters, and the air breathed, as well as for the diversity of species. According to Philippe Descola, he is a very famous writer on ecological matters in France and abroad. In Aristotle's philosophy, the word nature, physis in Greek, means the principle of internal developments of a living being, a principle that leads this living being to realize itself in such or such a way. According to this definition, human beings are therefore part of nature. They have the ability to understand the laws of the cosmos, but they are not an exception in the cosmos. And this is true even if, by decontextualizing the entities of nature, the taxonomies established by Aristotle prepare the ground for their objectivation. This was not enough for the moderns' understanding of the word nature. The moderns wanted, so Philippe Descola explained, wanted to establish a discontinuity between nature and culture. It has become almost self-evident for them. And I quote Philippe Descola, "So a second purification operation was needed. Humans had to become external and superior to nature." Philippe Descola argues that it is to Christianity that we owe this second upheaval, with its double idea of a transcendence of human being and of a universe drawn from nothingness by the divine will. As a result, he adds, the essence and the future of this created human being were no longer a matter of nature, but of grace, and he had to carry the mastery of creation everywhere, with all the risk that this implies. These proposals, which are quite expeditious, are found in many current reflections on ecology with or without subtlety. They are often coupled with an accusation of contempt for the body that monotheistic religions would have maintained. Philippe Descola thus speaks of creation as a temporary scene which, after the disappearance of nature, we will give way to the two main protagonists, I quote him, God and souls, that is to say, the human beings under another avatar. End of quotation. However, such assertions on the basis of one or two quotes from Christian thinkers remain eminently fragile and debatable. The great richness of Philippe Descola's works does not prevent us from criticizing his poor vision in reference to the authority of a few quotations of what comes to us from the Bible, which is moreover Jewish before being Christian. This biblical heritage would therefore have prepared the ground for the gradual transformation of nature into an object. And many ecological thinkers argue like that. As an object of knowledge and then an object of exploitation. It would have started with the development of mathematical physics in the 17th century. Despite its later revival in Romanticism, human sensitivity to nature would have disappeared or taken a backseat in favor of a desire to understand and master it intellectually and practically. Galileo and Descartes are very often condemned in ecological writings. According to this commonplace critic, by removing from nature any vital or divine dimension, Descartes, who was not a technician but was looking for true science, would have opened the way to intellectual and technical excess. Reason would then have lost its openness to what transcends it. A century later, Kant would affirm that it is not appropriate to present oneself before nature as a schoolboy who lets the teacher, nature, teaching him or her what she wants. We have to behave, so Kant says, as a judge in charge who forces the witnesses, nature, to answer the question we ask them. Human reason would no longer allow itself to be counted on by the so-called wonders of nature. It would be on this ground that capitalism would have prospered later on. Many of those who rightly condemn the frightening misdeeds produced by capitalism, while very often forgetting the catastrophic situation of many ancient so-called socialist societies, go on pointing an accusing finger to the Bible. According to these thinkers, the Bible would bear the primary responsibility in this sad history of the stranglehold on nature. And it will be for the benefit of the narrowly selfish interest of human beings to their worst extremists. Camille de Toledo, another French writer on ecological matters, does not hesitate to affirm, I quote him, the monotheistic break by fixing the place of the sacred outside the earth has given the world over to extraction and rent. Everything is offered to an inanimate economism. Not only is it by no means certain that the concepts of creation fixes the place of the sacred outside the earth. Creation is blessed through and through in the Bible, but it is also doubtful that this desire to designate the great and first responsible monotheism, without taking the trouble to study its text, is a good response to such a dire situation. The attempt to getting closer to the benefits discovered in the way nature was preserved, even venerated by peoples who remained aloof from the Western world and its misdeeds, as some ecologists encourage, may indeed teach us to be more respectful of nature, yet, to my mind at least, it's not the answer we need. It cannot lead us towards a real reparation and to an appeasement of our anguish. The fascination with non-Western ontologies seems to remain on the margins of current challenges. Should solidarity with animal and plant species, with rivers or mountains, imply an identity with them, as some people argue? One may disagree to the idea that human destiny is now called to such an identification with animals and plants as though it was its only salvation in the face of the Anthropocene disaster. The humanism of responsibility for the other, according to Levinas' philosophy, can be extended to non-human creatures without any confusion between them and human beings. It seems to me that the Bible already speaks this language and invites us to reflect on it. It may help us understanding better the uniqueness of each life. That is to say, the forever unique and irreplaceable form, exceptional therefore, that life has taken in each and every one of us. When my book, The Alliance with Nature, L'Alliance avec la Nature, was first published in 1989, these questions did not have the harshness and violence of today. But it has already seemed to me that the view of nature in Jewish monotheism deserved more incisive attention. In any case, it required more attention than a quick glance at the first chapter of Genesis, which some activists of the ecological cause are content with. Then, sure of their fact, they transmit it as an indisputable achievement in order to deduce that Elohim allows Adam to treat nature as he, Adam, wishes to, under the pretext that Elohim entrusts him with the task of cultivating the land, of discovering its riches, that is to say, the blessing that it carries within it, and that he encourages him to name the animals. Many ecologists argue that this is precisely the proof of the inevitably destructive agenda of domination in the Bible. This hasty conclusion, sure of its validity, continues to be authoritative even among educated people. It exempts its supporters from any question about its validity. The cause is heard, and it legitimizes a proper condemnation of the biblical heritage, as if this heritage authorizes an all-out domination of the earth plants and animals. Now, the careful and patient study of Genesis and of the many other pages in the Bible where the question of nature is mentioned does not ratify such a trial. Yet, yes, the Bible distinguishes Adam from the animal, created on the same day as he is, the sixth day. But this is not so as to authorize the former to mistreat the latter. Yes, it entrusts Adam with the responsibility of the earth, but this is not to encourage him to exploit it as he wishes. If Adam bears a responsibility for the whole creation, it can in no way be achieved to the detriment of it. In the Bible, human exception, strongly condemned by the proponents of pure animal-human continuity, goes hand in hand with the fact that human beings have to answer for what happens to the creation as a whole. It is indeed the behavior of human beings that induces these or that consequences on nature. See the deluge, the flood. Time and again in the Bible, the earth pays the price of human excesses for the violence and the depravity of so many people. It no longer meets their expectation. It becomes hostile to them, says the prophet. But human beings are the one who have exhausted it or made it alien to any possible regulation. We now know that over the centuries, human behavior has exerted a decisive and now out of control influence on geology, the biosphere, the Earth system, the Anthropocene. It has introduced a disruption in the natural balance, and unless radical changes are made, this will lead to an upsurge in natural disasters, mega fires, floods, suffocating heat, melting glaciers. While the Bible certainly does not speak this language, it is already aware of such dangers. On several occasions, it evokes events that resemble such catastrophes: deluge, drought, brambles and thorns instead of wheat and wine, a land that has become like pitch on fire that never goes out. In its own language, the Bible describes all this as a divine punishment. Yet, many Jewish interpreters explain that it is not a punishment, but the inevitable consequence of human behavior. One does not need to look for the hand of God in these terrible events. It is true that the image of a punishing God is a recurring image in the Bible, but like any other image, it must be interpreted. This image is a reminder. Human responsibility is infinite. Responsibility is incumbent on human beings even when they refuse to acknowledge it and assume the consequences of their thoughts, words, and deeds for the whole creation. This is the essential point. Human exception is not a privilege that authorizes the fulfillment of the slightest of one's own desires and of the unbridled satisfaction of one's lust, or of the unlimited enjoyment of the object of one's predation. Human exception means that Adam's thoughts, words, and deeds have an impact on the whole universe. It is in this sense that Rabbi Chaim of Volodzin argues that Adam is the soul of life, Nefesh HaChaim, and this is the title of his book, Nefesh HaChaim, beautiful book. This is therefore a deep and indelible solidarity between all creatures without exception in this case. From the humblest to the richest and most complex, all creatures are interconnected, and human beings have a leading role in maintaining alive this solidarity in all its components. It is worth noting that the Hebrew Bible never used the word nature. It speaks of a unique creation, of a creation that is also constantly renewed. This creation is a genesis in which human beings, animals, and vegetation, but also the cosmos, are connected. Creation is unique within the multiplicity of its components. As the Bible is not a conceptual text, it does not speak such a language, and rather than proposing an ontology, it prefers to detail how one by one the living singularities that populate this unique creation appear. It also announces that there is a covenant between each of them and their creator, since each creature, be it the humblest one, is inhabited by his creative word. These living singularities are all bearers of a word of blessing. Now, many creatures precede Adam. Adam is the last one. This is the important point according to Rabbi Chaim of Volodzin. It means that each human being recapitulates within himself or herself all the forces that play a role in the whole creation of the universe. This is precisely why human beings bear the responsibility for this universe. They are the soul of life, nefesh achaim. They can add vitality to this world or subtract vitality from it. The biblical narrative offers a narrative in which this responsibility is lived out at every moment. It does not call human beings to become equal to the waves, the ocean, the rivers, as some contemporary writers would want us to become, but to become responsible for all creatures, including those who, like indeed animals or rivers, cannot require protection from us. Thus, with regards to the blessing given by Isaac to Jacob, whom he takes for Esav, I quote, "Let him, Elohim, gives you dew from heaven and fat from the earth, an abundance of wheat and wine," Genesis 27. The Rebbe of Gur, in Nefesh HaChaim, not Nefesh HaChaim, slicha, explains that this blessing is to be understood as follows. May he grant you to find Elohim within the whole creation. In Sfat Emet, I was, yes? Yes, okay, I hope so. All living creatures, animal, vegetables, are animated by his words. Every living creature is inhabited by his vitality, chiyut. If such was not the case, this creature would disappear immediately. It means that though Elohim's vitality, chiyut, may remain hidden in our world, we don't perceive it directly. It has not disappeared. This is precisely the signification of the word of the verse, Isaiah 6, verse 3, all the earth is full of his glory. This glory remains invisible to those who transform nature into an object that they want to dominate. On the contrary, others, such as Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, go on looking for this glory even in times of great suffering. Rabbi Nachman encouraged his disciples to listen to the melody of the Ukrainian land where they lived. He argued that each herb has its song, each shepherd its own particular melody, according to the land where he looks after his animals. He believed that such an attention would help each person to find the inaugural point of goodness of creation, a point present in all creatures, a point that lives in everyone but is covered by multitude turpitude, especially that of wanting to dominate everything, including natural creatures. As long as the ecological consciousness does not dogmatically affirm that solidarity with all forms of life must imperatively mean a pure and simple identification with them, incriminating all those who do not share this opinion, the ecological conscience risks nothing to study biblical text, assuming the human expression as these texts teach us does not mean placing oneself at the center of everything, with, moreover, a license given to exploit all creation for one's own profit, including by enslaving other humans. This exception goes hand in hand with a dissented attitude that no fusion with nature can reveal, and of which no unbridled selfishness has any idea. Such a dissented attitude presupposes an awakening to the ethical vocation of this precise human exception. It is never acquired once for all. It teaches how each and every one of us discovers his or her uniqueness, not his or her identity. Uniqueness is not identity. When answering for the creatures of this world, it is therefore not a question of exalting the human exception for its scientific and technical prowess and its benefits, but forgetting these excesses, which are so often destructive, nor a desire to put an end to these excesses while thinking that only the fusion of the human I with all form of life would be our last chance of salvation. This is not a beneficial alternative. Just a few words and I conclude immediately. The West certainly has a lot to learn about those other ways of living and thinking, of feeling and admiring. Yet it does not mean that the West has to forget that an awakening to the fragility of the earth and to that of the living creatures is indeed taught by one of its founding texts, namely the Bible. Responsibility for the other, for others, the humanism of the other human being also comes from this book. Because of an ethical concern for other creatures, a concern that is an obligation we have not chosen, this responsibility suspends the pure affirmation of our ego, indifferent to what does not serve our own interest. Such is the human exception and the uniqueness of each one of us. When Levinas teaches that the humanity of each I lies in its responsibilities for the first comer, for the other, without any requirement of hope of reciprocity, his proposition accentuates the ethical meaning of this human exception. However, the philosopher also deduces from such an idea that our responsibility is, I quote Levinas, our responsibility is for the universe, or supporting the universe, which implies for all creatures who live in this universe, their fate depends on us. Sorry if I am too long.